By now, I hope you've written at least one robot dance program. I'm not sure why I find them so fun, but I really enjoy them. The only problem with writing these programs is that if you want to write one that lasts for any significant amount of time, the programming can get a bit tedious. For example, here's a 3-second dance program that I've written already. This first block, if you look at the configuration panel, drives forward for 1 second, forward for 1 second. This second block drives backwards for 1 second. Then I am going to turn left for half a second. And finally, I turn right. So I slid this all the way over there for half a second again. And that's 3 seconds worth of dance. It's nice enough. And if I wanted a 6-second dance, I could do that. You can actually grab all these blocks and I can go to the edit menu and say copy. And then I can edit and paste. And it'll paste copies of my blocks, not on the main control bar here, but I can drag them down and add them on. And if you look at this, I've got a 6-second dance, and that's okay. If I wanted a 9-second dance, I could do that too. So I'll just paste again. And there's my 3 seconds worth of dance, and I can add that onto the end here. At this point, you can't actually see the whole screen. It's worth noting that if you click on this little magnifying glass down here, that you can kind of move around what I'm looking at on the screen. So I could just move my view of the screen a little bit. And so anyway, I've got a 9-second dance here that we could run if we wanted to. In theory, it's easy enough to make a dance that's 12 seconds long or 27 seconds long using this copy and paste technique. But suppose I wanted to make a dance that was 300 seconds long or 3,000 seconds long. You have to admit that at this point, all that copying and pasting is going to get to be pretty painful. In this lesson, we're going to learn about how to write programs that contain loops. Loops allow us to repeat one or more blocks of code. There are several different types of loops. In this class, we're going to cover 3 of them. The first type lets you repeat your code a fixed number of times that you specify. For example, to create a 30-second dance, we could repeat our 3-second dance 10 times. Another type instructs your NXT to repeat your code forever, which in NXT terms means either until the batteries run out or until you press the gray rectangular stop button on the front of your NXT. The third type we're going to learn about in this lesson lets you specify a fixed length of time to repeat your code. For example, we could say to repeat our dance steps for 282 seconds. In another lesson, we'll be looking at another type of loop that instructs your NXT to repeat your code until the NXT senses something. For example, you can say, do my dance until the button gets pressed. Let's start by learning how to loop a fixed number of times, so we could turn our 3-second dance into, say, a 150-second dance. In NXT programming, we say we're going to control our loop based on count. Okay, so let's go back to our 3-second dance here. I'm just going to delete those extra blocks. I'm going to use the mouse and click and drag to circle them all. And then I'll just push the delete key on my keyboard to make them all go away. And let me slide back so I see the regular screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a loop block, and I'll stick it for now just at the end of my program. And if you look at the configuration panel for the loop block, you see the control can be a bunch of different choices. This time we're going to choose count. Okay? And if I said make count be 50, then we could have our loop happen 50 times so that you don't have to watch my robot dance 50 times. I'm going to set my loop to 2, and trust me, you can try the 50 at home. So here's my loop, and now I have to put something in my loop to say what actually gets repeated. So I'm going to again use my mouse to click and drag, and I'm going to grab these blocks and pull them out of the way for a second. The loop moves over, and then I'm going to dump them, there we go, right inside the loop. And just to make this a little bit more interesting, I'm going to add a sound block right at the beginning. And we'll have the system say good morning.
Good morning.
And I'll add one more sound block at the end. And let's try have a nice day.
Have a nice day.
Okay, so let's download this to my robot. Okay, so let's see what happens. So just to review, in this example, we set the control to count, and then we put in the number of times we want to repeat the code that's inside the loop. In our actual example, we set the count to 2, so it wouldn't take too long. But in this graphic, I've set the count to 50. Let's trace our program step by step so we can see exactly what's going on. We trace these programs just like all our other ones, starting with the first block on the left. So when we begin our program, our current block is the sound block. The NXT says good morning, and then continues on to the next block. The next block is our loop block. Regardless of the type of loop block you use, they all begin the same way, with this kind of gray, orange, gray bar. You want to think of that bar as always saying, welcome, come in. Whenever you arrive at a new loop, it instantly welcomes you to enter into the loop. So, back to our trace. We arrived at the entrance to the loop. It said, welcome, come in, so let's go in. Now we're on our first dance step. Go forward for 1 second. So the robot does that. Then the next dance step, go backward for 1 second. So the robot does that too. Then we do the turn left and the turn right. And now it gets interesting. We're at the end of our loop. The beginning of every loop always says, welcome, come in. The end of a loop can choose between saying one of two phrases. It can say, go away, which means you're done the loop. Or it can say, do it again, which means you should go back to the start of the loop and do it again. The end of the loop chooses which phrase to say based on how the loop's configuration panel is set. In the case of this loop, we set the control to count and the number of times to 2. Since we haven't been through this loop 2 times yet, the end of the loop tells us to do it again. So here we are back at the beginning of the loop again. It says, welcome, come in. So we go forward for 1 second and backward for 1 second. We turn left for half a second and turn right for half a second. Now's the fun part. We told the loop we wanted to go through twice, and now we've done so. So the loop says, go away to us, and we leave the loop and continue moving on. In this case, we move on to the sound block, which says, have a nice day, and then we reach the end of our program, so the NXT cleans up. In other words, it resets its screen, makes sure the speakers and motors are turned off. Changing our current program into one that loops forever is really very simple. So what I'm going to do is just click on my loop so that the control panel for the loop shows up. And instead of having my control be set to count, I'm going to switch it until it says control forever. And you'll actually see that on the loop itself, this little icon switches to a little infinity symbol. That's all we have to do. If we trace the code with the loop forever block, every step is going to happen in exactly the same way that it did in the repeat twice loop until we reach the end of the loop. When we reach the end of a forever loop, the loop always says, do it again. So, just as we'd expect with a forever loop, we're stuck repeating the loop forever, or at least until the NXT batteries die, or until we get fed up and push the rectangular gray button on the front of the NXT. The most interesting thing about this program is that since we never leave the loop, we never reach the final block in our program. So the robot will never say, have a nice day. Even pressing the gray rectangular button on the front of the NXT doesn't help, since that just causes the problem to stop immediately wherever it happens to be. Now let's talk about the third type of loop, the wait time block. Okay, so all we really have to do is click somewhere on the loop block so that we expose the loop's control panel. And we're going to change the control. Instead of forever, we're going to say loop time. And in this case, I'm going to pick 4 seconds. So I hit enter, and now our loop is set to have control time for 4 seconds. So now I've got something for you to think about. We have 3 seconds worth of dance in our loop, and we've set the loop time to be 4 seconds. So I have a question for you. How long will our dance last? Will it stop after 4 seconds since our loop time is 4 seconds? Or will it let 2 full cycles of the dance run through and stop at 6 seconds? Think about this for a minute. The one tip I'll give you is that you trace time loops exactly the same way you trace count and forever loops. If you want, pause this video here for a moment before continuing. The answer is that the dance will last for 6 seconds, because the only time you can leave a loop is at the exit when it determines whether it should go away or do it again. Let's trace this loop so you can see what I mean. We begin, as always, with the sound block saying good morning. When you enter a loop that has the control set to time, in addition to saying welcome, come in, the loop starts up a timer to keep track of how much time has elapsed. But even though this timer is always running whenever you're inside the loop only checks the timer when it reaches the end of the loop. So let's continue tracing this loop. First, we move forward for 1 second. Then we move backward for 1 second. Then we turn left for half a second, and then right for half a second. When we get to the end of the loop, 3 seconds have elapsed. The configuration panel for this loop says we leave after 4 seconds have elapsed. Since 4 seconds haven't elapsed yet, the loop says do it again, so we do it again. We're back to that first move forward block. When we finish the move forward block, 4 seconds have elapsed. But we still keep going because the time elapsed is only checked at the end of the loop. So we move backwards for 1 second and continue. When we complete the move backwards block, 5 seconds have elapsed. But again, since we only check the time at the end of the loop, we continue to do our turn left. After the left turn's completed, 5.5 seconds have elapsed. But we still just keep going in the loop and execute our right turn. Finally, we get to the end of the loop and we check and discover that 6 seconds have elapsed. That's more than the 4 seconds we wanted to run the loop for, so the loop says go away, and we continue forward onto the sound block. Since the timer was part of the loop, when we leave the loop, the timer disappears. Now the NXT says, have a nice day. And there you have it. We've reached the end of our program, and the NXT cleans up, that is, turns off the motors and the speaker and resets the display. Let's just review what we've learned in this lesson. The most important thing you should take away is that where NXT loops are concerned, you always execute all of the blocks inside the loop in order before checking whether or not it's time to leave. We've seen 3 types of ways to control a loop. First, we controlled the loop by count. That is, by telling the NXT exactly how many times we wanted the loop to repeat. Next, we saw how you could control a loop to run forever. And we learned that if you do so, then you never execute any of the blocks that come after that loop. Finally, we looked at loops that repeat for a certain length of time. And we learned that since the loop always executes all of the enclosed blocks before checking whether it's time to leave, this means that the time we specify is actually just a lower limit on how long the loop should run, but our loop might take longer. So, time for you to go and play with loops. I encourage you to experiment with each of the 3 types we've covered in this lesson. Have fun!